insights I'm about to provide you are actionable insights and steps that you should be thinking about as it relates to how you're cultivating and curating your value proposition, how you live in the universe of building your brand and reputation, and how you develop marketing, how you develop your lead generation, how you develop your voice within the industry. And I will tell you, you go through this, and this will all be available to you on kwrealtymke.com. When you go through this again afterwards, you should be thinking about this in the lens of what is it that I'm doing that I need to change, that I am not doing, or that I am, quite frankly, overthinking. There are some consumer insights in here that I think are incredibly powerful as to where people spend or waste time, energy, and money on things that, quite frankly, don't matter. And so my goal in going so deep in depth to these insights and why I spent so much time in reviewing this material for you was to give you proactive material that you should be thinking about as to how you operate your business in order how to navigate in the market of the moment from where you are to where you want to go so that you can take an inordinate amount of market share versus your competition. Make sense? And it's all about creating efficiencies as to how you operate and communicate. So here we go. US events, couple things I want to touch on. I won't touch on all 10, but I'll probably touch on 4 or 5 of the 10. Okay. First up, sides per agent. We are in a equal opportunity, unequal reward business. Last year, there were 52,000 transactions in Southeastern Wisconsin. Okay. The average agent in Southeastern Wisconsin did less than 5 deals. Less than 5 deals per agent. Okay. And my point to saying everyone has an equal opportunity, there is an unequal reward, is there are a ton of agents in our environment last year and a ton of agents in our environment this year that will have their best years ever, despite the fact that sides per agent was at its lowest in history at 5.3. So it's why the industry feels harder. There are more people running around doing less units. So what does that mean and how does it break up? If you go back to the period from 2000 to 2007, what happens is agent attrition happens slower than the slowdown within the business. So from 2000 to 2007, there were 591,000 agents that were added across the US, and sides dropped nearly in half from 13.5 to 7.5. Okay. Then from 2008 to 2012, the NAR shed 338,000 agents, and sides per agent increased from 6.9 to 9.3. Again, agents leaving the business was slower than the slowdown of the business. Then from 2013 to 2023, 581,000 agents joined the industry, and sides dropped from 9.8 per agent to 5.3, the lowest in recorded history for the NAR. Couple things to point out. One, historical average for sides per agent is 10. The fact that we had a 50% increase or decrease over the last 10 years has to make you think about how real estate is a contact sport, something to pay attention to. 2, volume per agent. Interestingly enough, because the appreciation within our business over the last, let's just say 10 years, this was the 6th best year on a per agent volume metric. Okay. And so the message here was this: you can still make a very good income in this business because homes have continued to appreciate. What your GCI won't determine your income, though. How you manage your expenses will determine your net income. And you just need to be thinking about, on a per transaction basis, what are my expenses? Because if units are down and volume is up, how am I managing my expense ratios accordingly so that I can make a profitable business? Okay. Now, I thought of this and I said, so the average agent does 5.3 units and the average agent does, volume per agent was right around 3 million on an average per agent. I wanted to say, what did we do locally here in Southeastern Wisconsin? Okay. Something to note, a KWMK associate in Southeastern Wisconsin on average closed 11 units per agent in our environment. That's double the national average. Also, they closed the average agent closed 4.25 million in Keller Williams in southeastern Wisconsin. Okay, that's nearly 69% higher. So here was my takeaways from just a local level, because I was curious as to our perspective and creating a culture of productivity. On average, a KW associate in southeastern Wisconsin closed 102% more in closed volume per agent and 69% more in closed units per agent. Incredible, credible statistics around the culture of productivity and the environment that you're a part of and how you lean on each other. Next, distressed sales. How many of you heard when buyers are always worried about buying at the peak of the market, affordability, this, that, and the other? Distressed sales were basically non-existent since 2018. Okay. Now, you also heard about a ton of homes that might be underwater because did they buy at the peak of the market? Did they buy at the peak of the market? Last year, in Q3 of 2023, less than 1.8% of homes were underwater. Quite frankly, those that were underwater their theory was they were purchased within the last 90 days of when this data was pulled. And so effectively, there really wasn't many homes that were underwater, non-existent. Next, a huge dilemma within our industry is student loan debt. The dilemma is it's just not improving. So we have to, as I mentioned last week, we have to help people how to navigate their financial situations in order to help them understand what they can afford and how they can afford it by utilizing a variety of different products or helping them reach their end game and goals from a savings perspective so that they can get into a home, which then was a little sidebar nugget, which talks about allocation of financial investments. Where do the world's wealthy have their wealth tied up in 2020, 2021, and 2022? Because this is a bit behind in terms of allocation of financial investments. Here was something to note. And the reason why I included this was more so of when we talked last week, when I talked about the holistic approach to the agent. Something to have note, cash and cash deposits for the financially wealthy has increased from 24% to 34%. Okay. From 24% to 34%. So cash is king. And as those of you who've had success, making sure that you're maintaining a healthy balance in reserves. Outside of that, real estate has remained untouched. 15% of people's net worth has typically been tied up in real estate assets, right? You can see fixed incomes, you can see stock market, and you can see alternative investments. Interesting thing here to note, alternative investments have nearly doubled. Alternative investments are things such as gold, silver, along with, I don't even know the proper term to them, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, all those alternative investments have doubled in the last 10 years. And so my point to this is the world's wealthy are now holding on to more cash. Something to be thinking about as it relates to how you manage your income as inflow and outflow. Okay, something I wanted to point out. Economic risks in terms of our macro environment in 2024, ineffectual governance. What this means is when you have split governance, can anything get done in terms of creating policy that impacts the economy? A lot to be seen in what will happen coming in November, but something they're paying attention to. 2, global conflicts, geopolitical conflicts, political and direct. If you go back to February of 22, no one would have, at least at our level, no one would have understood the impact Russia invading Ukraine would have on our geopolitical capital markets. It had an impact. So how they're paying attention to what's going on globally and how it impacts our economy is important. 3, financial system risks stemming from commercial real estate. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. There is an inordinate amount of commercial debt that is set to mature in 2024. And that debt is set to mature at rates significantly higher. What happens to the commercial real estate market will have an impact on our macro and global economy. 4, something that I know because I have heard this anecdotally from people that are moving to Wisconsin, natural disaster and severe weather events will continue to plague our industry and our economy. The beautiful thing about where we live in southeastern Wisconsin, I can tell you because I know this for a fact, people are moving here because it helps them mitigate natural disaster and severe weather events. Those of you who own homes in Florida, how has that impacted your homeowner's insurance? It's up significantly. So global and economic risks heading into 24 that we're paying attention to on a macro level and how it impacts our industry. Now, in terms of the National Association of Realtors profile of home buyers and sellers, This is where I'd be paying attention to and thinking about it from the lens of how am I operating my business and how am I communicating my value? Okay, so let's dig into it. First, a couple general themes. I should say themes. I made an error. Real estate is a contact sport. There's never been a year to be the economist of choice. There's more short-term noise than what we've seen in the last 4 years. Okay. The dialogue, and I challenged you with this last week, is let me tell you what it's really like. Everybody wants to know what's going on in the local market. Let me tell you what it's really like. Talk of the local market in real time and know it with confidence. I tried to deliver economic value to you guys so that you can be the economist of choice within your markets. And if you need additional insights, you can always reach out. I want you to be able to talk about the market with confidence, because the power you get when you are done is you will convey knowledge that no one else in the market has. It shocks me when I run into other agents in other business, in other companies at social events and things, and they're constantly peppering me with questions because their head is in the sand and they're not paying any attention other than their new listing that's coming live at 123 Main Street next week. And they don't have a voice of reason or confidence when they talk to their clients around what's going on within our industry. They are seeking answers. Be the person who is studying the market and having the answers so you can act with confidence. Okay, so let's take a look at first-time home buyers. Last year, 32% of all transactions had a first-time home buyer. Essentially, millennials are struggling to access housing, even though it's the largest demographic in the US labor force. Again, I'm going to repeat a theme that you're going to continue to hear from me. Be the economist of choice in helping people navigate the blueprint to how they can get into housing. 21 to 35 is the largest demographic in the US labor force. We have to help them navigate how to get into housing. Right? Need to provide an avenue to build wealth, which equals education, something you all hold and should do. Because quite frankly, this number needs to increase north of 45% if we want our industry to be humming, and we all play a part in what that looks like in order to create elevated levels of demand. Okay. Primary reason for purchasing a home on the buyer side, couple things to note. Okay. The desire to own a home still remains strong. If you look historically, going back to 2006 all the way to 2023, the desire to own a home still remains strong. Interestingly to note, something to pay attention to of a trend since coming out of COVID, the desire to be closer to friends and family has increased significantly in the last 3 years. With the advent of work from home and the advent of technology and the ability from people to work from wherever, the ability to live closer to home than friends and family. Think about that in terms of how you segment your database. Who's living away from home and how are you communicating with them in a different market so that they know when they want to raise their hands and they start having kids and they want to move home, who are they going to call? You or your peer? Okay, a little nugget to pay attention to. Next, interestingly to note, buyers underestimate the short term and overestimate the long term. Why? Because life events happen. Something to notice, expected tenure. They expect to be in their home 15 years. That, quite frankly, has not changed since 2017. They expect to be in their home for 15 years. Now, for those of you that have been in this business for a while and you look back at your database and you're tracking home anniversaries of when clients have purchased, you would know that the tenure in their previous home is much shorter than 15 years, anywhere between 7 to 10 years. So as you're tracking and segmenting your database of what people's home anniversaries are or where people have lived, if you're looking at your database strategically, you should be able to identify those that are getting close to a decision based on tenure in previous home. Okay. Important little nugget there as it relates to how you manage your database effectively so that you're communicating to the appropriate people on who could be close to making a decision. Next, weeks in the home search really, quite frankly, hasn't changed. Even though the market's moving fast, on average, for the last, going back to 2014, people are searching for a home for 10 weeks. Good little thing to make sure that we're educating on the front side, our buyers, as to what the typical process and how long it takes. Next, first step in the home buying process, okay? Couple things. 41% of the time they searched online for properties. 41% of the time. Did you notice that I did not say 100% of the time they started their home search online? 41% of the time. 20% of the time they contacted a real estate agent first. And three, which I don't think we do enough of a good enough job, is they look to online for information about the buying process. Is your online presence communicating about what the process looks like to educate consumers? Remember, in a complex transaction, people are seeking advice and education as to how to navigate the market of the moment. And are you communicating that? One other thing to point out, and again, this is a trend coming out of COVID, visited open houses where they started the buying process. That has come back to historical levels. When you look back as it relates to the hangover effect of 21 and 22 in terms of what open houses did to help navigate buyers, it finally had a bounce back in 23 where people started the process. Now, granted, it was 3% of the time. It has come back to historical levels. So the advice in this, stay in contact, do videos, have a website, hold open houses, educate your buyers on the process. Okay. And if you're not doing that, scrap everything else you're doing and think about those 4 or 5 things. 70% of the time, you have to remember buyers start their process via online or an agent, 70% of the time. Next, value of website features. I think this is an incredibly telling statistic, so I'm going to help you break this down. Okay. Most people overthink their website. Most people spend too much money on insignificant items or features on their website. What should you be paying attention to? Detailed property info, property photos, floor plans, details about recently sold properties, neighborhood info, virtual tours, real estate agent, your contact info, and pending sales and contract status. All of it is educationally based. If you notice that, all of it is educationally based. This is the useful information. The non-useful information is around how people value in your websites, interactive maps, general videos, info about upcoming open houses, virtual listing appointments. What does that tell you? It's a belly-to-belly sport. People are getting back to wanting to do things with their senses. How are you setting up your business to be a sensory business? How does that look? How does that feel? How does that taste? How does that touch? How does that smell? Think about your senses and how you're communicating that. Okay. People are looking for information on how to track their local market. Provide useful information online. Now, method of home purchase. Interesting thing to note here. Despite all the noise that went on in 2023, 89% of all transactions utilized an agent. 89%. That is up from the last 3 to 4 years. That tells you people are willing to pay for your value in a world of complexity. People are literally telling us as much by utilizing it, your value in 89% of all transactions in 2023. That should put wind in your sails as it relates to the confidence that consumers have in what it is that you do. Okay. Next, buyer representation agreement, or as we call it in Wisconsin, buyer agency. Okay. I alluded to this earlier. But buyer agency representation, if you look at it, yes, no, or don't know, was the majority. About 59 to 60% of all transactions in 2023 did not have a buyer agency. 59% of all transactions not utilizing a buyer representation agreement. This is why the industry is being challenged for lack of transparency. Okay. Get a value prop, create a service plan, get your buyer agency agreements signed. I will repeat, get a value prop, create a service plan, get your buyer agency signed. How you communicate this is how you will create an insurance policy in terms of your level of compensation on the buyer side. Okay. And what do buyers want from their agents? Here's what you really need to know. The top 3 things: they want to be educated. They want you to slow down enough for them to fully appreciate what you can do for them, and change the way you talk about your service approach. Okay. The commentary on this was this: we have been operating at such a torrid pace within this industry. The reason for the legal environment that we are operating in right now is this is a general commentary. Agents have been running around with their hair lit on fire or a chicken with their head cut off. And they haven't slowed down enough in order to articulate their value and create transparency to the process and create transparency to the commission rates. And because of that, consumers have challenged the lack of transparency because we need to slow down. So my 3 takeaways from what buyers want from their agent: educate them, slow down enough for them to fully appreciate what you can do for them, and change the way you talk about your service approach. Now, how did buyers find their agents? No surprise. Referred by a friend, neighbor, or relative. They used an agent previously to serve their home. That was the majority of how people found their agent. 3, they inquired about a specific property viewed online, was only 7% of the time. And how buyers found their agent, only 7% of the time, was through a website or an online platform. Again, this is a contact sport. People overthink the online lead sources. You need to be thinking about how you're getting in front of people or how you're building your brand and reputation, because 43% of the time was through a referral. So 70% of the time, buyer finds their agent via referral sphere of influence at 43%, 13% they previously utilized, okay? 7% was website, 7% was an online inquiry. People who avoid contact make less money, quite frankly, point blank. If you avoid contact with people, you will make less money. Make peace with it and make contact. I always call lead generation forced human interaction. Okay? Just go back to the days when you were single and you were trying to find someone to, date and get on the dance floor with. Now, buyer interviews, something also to be paying attention to. 71% of the time, clients only interviewed one agent. 17% of the time, they interviewed 2 agents. If you're not first, you're irrelevant. Okay, 88% of the time, buyers interviewed only 2 agents. 71% of the time, they only interviewed 1 agent. The average consumer in southeastern Wisconsin knows 12 real estate agents. If you're 3 through 12, you don't matter. So, most important factor for buyers, and then I'm going to transition into sellers. Experience, honest and trustworthy, reputation, friend or family member. Incredibly something to pay attention to, because I think sometimes you guys create mixed messaging as it relates to how you secure clients. Experience is made of professionalism and knowledge, not numbers on a page. Professionalism and knowledge. It's why I love when new agents get into success quickly, because they're ignorant. They don't know any different. They're willing to do whatever it takes, but they're willing to convey how they have confidence in what they do. Experience is made of professionalism and knowledge. You have to articulate your value proposition through what it is that your professionalism and knowledge is. Okay? What they don't care about is all the stuff rests down below. Now, shifting to the home in terms of the seller side, couple things as it relates to helping, again, build wind in your sales or confidence as to what you do. Is real estate still a good financial investment? 82% of consumers believe so. That is a very, very high consumer confidence index. Okay. The other thing you need to note, and this relates to how you attract clients, homeowners' net worth is 35x of that of a rentor. Okay. 35 times greater than that of a renter. So if you think about on the buyer side, the largest demographic in the US labor force is 21 to 35. Last year, 35% of all transactions had a first-time home buyer. It needs to be 45% or higher. How are we educating consumers around how they build their wealth on their balance sheet, and how homeowners are 35 times greater than renters? Now, repeat and referrals. In 2023, 90% of clients said they would definitely use their agent again. If real estate agents just stayed in contact, they would have better odds than Vegas. Buyer and seller satisfaction. Buyer satisfaction, 92% buyer satisfaction. Seller satisfaction, 91%, with 70% of the time being very satisfied. Again, buyers and sellers have high levels of confidence in what you do and the value you provide. So let's jump into the seller side of the equation. How did sellers find their agents? Okay. They were either referred to by a friend, neighbor, or relative, or they used their agent previously to sell a home. First nugget you need to be paying attention to, and this is an industry problem as to why people don't stay in contact and segment their database and look at it more strategically. 70% were very satisfied, 21% were somewhat satisfied, creating a satisfaction score of 91%. Yet in the next 7 to 10 years, the average tenure of someone is in their home, only 26% of the time did they utilize the agent who helped them purchase the home previously. That is a gigantic gap in terms of orphaned clients and agents' inability to stay in contact. Okay. Something else to pay attention to, personal contact by agent, reaching out in terms of the old school lead generation methods. 69% of finding sellers is a communication game. Sellers found their listing agents via repeat referral and contacted by the agent 69% of the time. Again, I said this before and I'll say it again. Those that are afraid to make contact will make less money. Point blank. Can't be afraid of it. Seller interviews, very similarly to the buyer. One agent they interviewed was 81% of the time. 2 agents was 12% of the time. 93% of the time, sellers interviewed 1 or 2 people. That is it. If you are not first, you are basically irrelevant. 81% of the time, they only interviewed 1 person. 93% of the time, they interviewed 2 person. Number 3 through 12, you don't matter. Okay? What sellers want from their agent, basically how to price, how to help market the home, how to help sell it within a specific time frame, how to help find a buyer. So these 4 areas cover 88% of seller desires within their agent. Competitive pricing, marketing that attracts attention and drives a timeline, and fixes to maximize value. If you address those 4 things, you will cover 88% of sellers' desires. Now, most important factor for sellers, 75% of it is reputation, honest and trustworthy, friend or family member referred them, or knowledge of the neighborhood. That's it. How do you build your reputation and your brand, and how are you communicating it? Repeat and referrals, 89% of the time, and a client said they would use their agent again. So, method they used to sell the home. Sold the home using an agent or broker was 89%. Again, if you look at the historical averages, 89% is incredibly, incredibly healthy in terms of the number of transactions that we're utilizing an agent on one side for the seller side of it. The other thing to note, which everyone always thinks that FSBOs would have popped up in a market that moves fast. It was only 7% of all transactions, which was down from 10% the year before. Complexity. People are looking for answers, and how you educate them is how you will win the listing. Okay. Incentives offered to attract buyers. 77% of the time, there was none. Outside of just our typical offers. Home warranty policies were 9% up from 8% in 2022, although down coming out of 2020 and 2021. I would expect as the market, we're starting to see more contingencies within offers and buyers wrangling back a bit more control within the transactions. You'll see that more. So things to pay attention to. I went through a lot of stuff fast. Here's my advice to you. I cut what was a 3-hour presentation into basically 25 minutes. I then took a 100-page deck and boiled it down into 20 pages for you. If I were running a business like you all were, I'd be going through this. And again, as I've said this many times before this morning, I would be going through it with the lens of what does my business look like based off of what consumers are telling us? How does my brand, what is my ethos? What is my energy? How am I communicating? How am I educating? What does this look like? And am I wasting time, energy, and resources in other areas that are not important? Dig into it. All the information is available to you. Anything you see in yellow is my own personal commentary to try and give you guys actionable insights. Sound good? Beautiful. A lot of information the last 2 weeks. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for showing up. Hopefully you found it valuable. Any commentary or feedback, feel free to hit me up. I'll let everybody jump into their meetups. Lake Country, I'll be joining you guys. North Shore, jumping in with Mandy, Josh leading the Tosa crew. Guys, have a phenomenal Tuesday, March 12th. Thanks for showing up.